She told me at the end, "I love you." But I was so angry inside that I just hung up the phone, didn't say anything. And a few hours later, my sister called me and told me she had found Grandma passed away. In order to wake up, I had to let the monsters catch me, which meant I had to lie on my stomach. And they would come, reach me, and the feeling was very unpleasant, like a physical poking, as if someone was digging into your back. But then I would enter a grey tunnel and wake up.
How do we actually do this in practice? To stay in the neutral state for longer, to honor the emotion, to let it pass, but not pretend it isn't there.
What helped me learn to connect with this neutrality was my relationship with death.
Okay.
At one point, I started seeing energy coming down from the earth in the form of droplets, and I thought it was raining. I would go outside, but it wasn't raining, it was just dripping. I saw it a second time, a third time, and at some point I somehow intuitively realized that this was energy, prana, that I was simply able to see.
Why is it hard for us to say I love you?
Because we really want to be right.
About what?
About our beliefs. We really want to be right and validated in our feelings.
Welcome to Reality Explorers. Today, for the first time, I think that finally a colleague is sitting across from me. This is Anna Kapurska, whom I met literally a few days ago at our first event in Sofia. And super spontaneously and synchronistically, we decided to record a show because she shared a lot of interesting things with us. She told us things related to the fact that, just like us, at a younger age she took life into her own hands and is a free person who chooses to do the things that make her happy. A person who has had lucid dreams since a very early childhood and knows about channeling, about parallel realities, about all these things that fascinate us. And I find it very interesting that you are our guest. I find it very interesting that I can talk to you like this. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation, and I am really happy about this spontaneous meeting. It's almost unreal how we met just a few days ago, and today I'm here.
What made you say yes, to agree, besides the fact that your day was free, as far as I understood?
Well, it's a feeling. That's what has been guiding me more and more lately. Even when I watched the first interview on your channel, and I told myself back then, somehow I feel like I want to go there and share some things. And then right away another thought came to my mind: I have nothing to talk about.
Of course.
But actually at your meeting, which was also ours because we participated there too, I realized that I do have something to share. And because after I shared it like that in front of people, during the breaks, a few people just came up to me, gathered around, and they were interested and asked me questions. And one woman shared that her daughter has had a similar experience with nightmares, like the ones I had as a child. And I started telling stories, and in the end, that's actually my profession. I'm a storyteller.
Actually, I forgot to add that you are a professional, and when I said colleague, it's as if everyone knows what I graduated in. Actually, you are an editor, and not just an editor, but
a post-production specialist.
A post-production specialist. And as a side note for people who are not in this industry at all, what does a post-production specialist mean?
Post-production is actually the entire process that happens after the film is shot. This includes editing, color grading, audio post-production, special effects, a lot of things. This can be a very complex and lengthy stage of making a film, and it's also very creative.
You are currently 28 years old.
Yes.
How did this all start, your whole adventure getting passionate? First about cinema and storytelling, and second somewhere along the way. At the same time, along another path, all these spiritual realizations and this idea of awareness overall were developing.
This awareness is something I've carried with me since I was born. I have very early childhood memories, and I came with memories of past lives, of reincarnation, I remember as a child, I asked my mom and dad, for example, Mom, what was it like when you were a man? Dad, what did it feel like when you were a woman?
How old were you then?
3 or 4, maybe. I remember very clearly how the worlds blended together for me back then. There was a period in my life when I had forgotten these things, but now, especially in the last few years, I remembered them again. There were moments when the worlds of real experience like this one just blended together. In my grandmother's garden, there was a wall, and I had an experience where I entered it, and inside there was a garden full of flowers. And I remember that years ago, when I still hadn't mentally explained these things to myself, I wondered how this was possible, you know? I remember that it was true, but how exactly did it happen? It's not that I physically went there, but spiritually and mentally I experienced it as an experience.
What were the first ways you started to explain the invisible to yourself?
I was lucky to have a mother who, for some reason, talked to me a lot about in the form of fairy tales, but not exactly about Atlantis. About the fact that people can do anything. And I took it quite literally as a child, but to be honest, one of my first encounters with the world of the invisible was actually through fear, through nightmares, but that was an invaluable experience that I really appreciate now.
How long did that last?
5 years.
5 years?
Constantly from when I was 3 until I was 8, and it happened every single night. And I actually remember the first nightmare.
Are you okay now to share part of that first nightmare with us?
Yes, it wasn't anything special. The very first nightmare wasn't that scary, but it was very purely metaphorical in terms of symbols. I was on the land where my father lives, outside the city in a village, but it was flat and green. There was only one house, nothing else, just a blue sky. My grandmother, who is one of the closest souls to me and is no longer with us, but she was, and a son with a face which really resembles, there are such symbols of Mithra, for example, in Zoroastrianism, there are such symbols of a son with a face. And my grandmother pointed at this thing and told me its name. And that's when a mix of nightmares actually began. Sometimes there were also some very beautiful magical dreams, but this image appeared many times in the dreams themselves. At night, while I was awake and I was afraid of it. Later, I realized that this is a neutral symbol. To this day, I don't know exactly what it is, but somehow it accompanied me on this adventure and watched over me.
And actually, this thing continued for those 5 years, only with this symbol or with different ones. Variants?
This symbol would appear from time to time just as an observer, and the nightmares themselves happened in the same worlds. So you have this kind of repetition. Every night you fall asleep and go to the same place. And even though the plots are different, the world is the same, the creatures feel the same way. Those evil creatures back then, the way I experienced them...
So is it true that once you find the key to this recurring dream, it stops repeating?
Absolutely, yes.
How did that happen?
First, I learned to dream consciously so that I could wake up consciously from my dreams. And I discovered different ways I could wake up depending on how deeply my body was asleep. And then the actual breaking of that cycle happened in a very spontaneous way. When I was 8 years old, I told a family friend about this, and she said to me, next time you have nightmares, just call all of us, in this case my family, into your dream and we will fight the monsters together. And that's exactly what happened. And at that moment, those nightmares stopped. Like now, I just see this as a way for the child in me to connect with her inner strength and be able to say, no, you know, I don't want this energy. I don't want this thing inside me. And these nightmares started because I began kindergarten at the age of 3, where as a very, very pure and naive child, really very naive, pure and good, not understanding this world. And so the energy is the heavy energy in him. I was bullied a lot by all the children. I was a year younger than them. They would lock me in cabinets. I was very introverted. I would sit and draw. For me, drawing was everything at that age, and they would just insult me, hit me, steal my drawing things, and somehow neither in my nightmares nor in this experience at kindergarten did I find enough understanding from the adults. Then they...
Did you hide it? Sorry for interrupting you. From everyone that this was happening, or did you share it?
I shared it, but they just didn't take it seriously because you're a child, and as a child you're not supposed to think like an adult. But I more or less thought like a mature person, and so I was kind of left alone with these experiences. But now I think it's for the best, because a lot of people need to learn how to be alone with their biggest fears, both in the physical world and in our inner world.
Well said, and I'll get back to that a bit later. But tell me about lucid dreams. How does a 7 or 8-year-old child learn without reading books, without someone selling them a program and teaching them step by step, without using the internet? How do you become aware at some point and realize that this is another kind of illusion?
I think it's out of necessity. It's a bit just like in life, if you think about it. Many people wake up what we call a spiritual awakening after some kind of serious trauma or event, something that comes and hits us in the face. And we either completely sink and get lost in that thing, or we wake up and find some inner strength. And for me, that was the process, because those nightmares were so unbearably unpleasant for me. I just woke up in many... So even at an early stage, when those nightmares started, I began to dream lucidly. And from there, what is most interesting to me, because this is a big metaphor for life and the way I live now and deal with real fears in my life. How did this happen? They would come, reach me, and the feeling was very unpleasant, like a physical poking, as if someone was digging into your back. But then I would enter a gray tunnel and wake up, and I knew that this was my way to escape the nightmare. If I kept running from the monsters, this nightmare would go on and on and on. And actually, if I decided to let them catch me, I was actually freeing myself. And now, how do I interpret that nowadays? Well, when I have a really strong fear in my life or an unpleasant feeling, I just relax and allow it to be in my body and
it kind of dissolves.
It dissolves. Kind of like learning not to be afraid of fear.
That's very profound, because sometimes we think we're afraid of a certain person or of something they've said. We worry that we might not live up to ourselves, but we rarely get to the point where we're afraid of fear itself. Which is a paradox, right? The moment you understand what you're really afraid of, what your fear actually is, how do you define fear?
Fear is everything that's connected to the illusion of this world, meaning the illusion that we lose, that we die, that we disappear, that we get hurt, meaning the more we exist in the feeling of this illusion, the more we experience this thing called fear. I associate it with the limitation of reality, of physical reality, when we are only in it.
You've mentioned physical reality several times already. How did you even get to the other worlds? What happened to you to realize that there is more?
Well, I've always known that there is more, but I've gone through many periods of denial.
Like what, for example?
This thing. What do you mean exactly?
What kind of denial? I mean, for example, you're a teenager and you say, no, that's nonsense.
Yes, let's say, for example, at one point I started seeing the energy coming down from the earth in the form of droplets, and I thought it was raining, and I started seeing it more and more, especially in places where there's a lot of nature. And I was convinced that it was raining. But then one time I went outside. It wasn't raining, but it was dripping. I could see it, I could see this rain. A second time, a third time. And so at one point I realized kind of intuitively that this is energy prana that I can simply see. And yet, at one point in my life, in my early 20s, I very firmly pulled away and separated myself from this knowledge about all the things I sense and see. There were many things like that since I was a teenager, because my mother used to do massages and I learned alongside her. And I can literally touch a person and immediately know where it hurts. I know where to press. That's another thing I haven't really questioned much, why it happened. I can do that, especially a little bit when I concentrate, to see the energy around people and all those things. I remember when I was little, again in kindergarten, I couldn't sleep at nap time. So what did I do? Well, I would look at the sky and watch those little specks that seemed to move and gather, because against the sky, they were much clearer. It's exactly that thing that comes out of the pineal gland. I just started to ignore those things at a certain stage in my life, but I definitely needed that stage too.
Definitely. And when did you rediscover it? Sometime around 20.
4, 5. Then I just started to open up to it again through my own perspective, because that's also the reason why I needed that distance. One initial, more conscious opening to these things is the realization that they exist, that there are other people who understand, about the world we call beyond the physical. But they're actually the same thing. I was 14 then, and I encountered the reality of gurus of yoga. Say it.
You said 3 years ago, so it doesn't seem like you were 14 then.
Yeah, no, I'm just giving a little...
No, everything is... you were 14 when you gave up on this, when you saw maybe that commercial side.
At 14, I opened up for the first time, actually more consciously, yes, to these things, to start realizing that they exist, but it followed later, during my teenage years. A bit of a pushback from the point of view that I didn't like the fact that everything was somehow put into a certain frame. There's a stigma, you have to have a guru, and then this idea of enlightenment, of some very difficult path that you have to walk. Yes, that's where this closing off happened over the years, and the actual awakening, which led to who I am now, which for me is the greatest awakening in my life so far, happened maybe about 4 years ago, actually, as a result of a breakup. A very trivial human situation. But something in the situation just led to my whole world falling apart. My idea of myself, of everything. And actually then I had to find myself again through quite a lot of darkness and despair.
When you say darkness, was there something specific at that time that you turned to, something that brought you that knowledge? Or were you more practicing on your own, understanding, receiving some signs, and following them?
More on my own. Maybe about 1.5 years ago, I started to open up again to, let's say, external things. As I shared with you, I really like Eckhart Tolle. He has helped me a lot. I've truly made a huge leap in my life thanks to him. But in the beginning, I started on my own because I needed to somehow find my own path through myself to experience these things. And somehow I believe that this is very important for everyone, because nowadays there is everything in terms of information, paths, opportunities, but we have to filter it through ourselves to experience it, to go through it in such a way that it becomes integrated, and not just to believe, but to know.
Yes. Are you more of a reader or a practitioner? Do you like to experience things and explain them to yourself? Or do you first want to see how something is explained and then try it out?
I'm more of a practitioner, and then I look for confirmation of what I practice, but it can be the other way around too. It often happens that I hear or read something and then try it, but more often what I read is something I've already experienced. It just confirms it and opens up that knowledge, that understanding even more.
Eckhart Tolle, what stands out to you right now from him as a conclusion, as knowledge? What have you taken from him? What stays with you and you carry from him?
First of all, that we are consciousness. We are everything we think we should be. He is within us. There is no need to become something, and the way he suggests we reach this consciousness is simply to remain in this state of neutrality, especially when we have stronger negative experiences, thoughts, or feelings, to allow them to exist as possibilities in this neutrality without attachment. This, in my opinion, very quickly clears a person from the illusion of experiences and negative encounters.
You know, it often happens to me. I've been in the public eye for 11 years now, and very often, after I've done something obviously well, yes, I can't admit that this is the case on one hand, and on the other, I reinforce even more the tendency towards self-doubt. And I realize that I do this thanks to that same belief and the awareness that everything is equally possible. Do you understand? As an idea, how do we put this into practice? To stay in the neutral state for a longer time, to honor the emotion, to let it pass, but not to pretend it doesn't exist?
What helped me learn to connect with this neutrality is my relationship with death, with the topic of death, let's put it that way. It's a subject that fascinated me even as a teenager. And in general, this idea of transience, that this life, this journey will end at some point. That gives a perspective where problems, what we call problems and difficulties, aren't that significant, at least in a deeper sense. What I experienced in those moments of hitting rock bottom and inner downfall, which now sounds funny to me when I say it like this, but that's how I felt back then, was actually a kind of comfort from the idea of death. I remember hitting a really deep rock bottom where the thought came to me, I'm at the bottom, but I'm the one who gives things a good or bad meaning. And in that moment, I just let go of the plus and minus and fell into this neutrality. And it was this feeling that now I allow myself to die, but no, don't imagine it like someone who wants to hurt herself. Yes, we're not talking about any suicidal thoughts. We're just talking about this feeling of, what if I just disappear now, just stop existing? And a feeling of comfort and calm, and actually
that nothing that's happening to you is really that serious.
Yes, that even if the worst thing happens, it has its end. Because in the first place, this reality we're experiencing here is a kind of illusion. It's a kind of game. And actually beyond this thing is death. And death is the real life.
Very well said.
And it's where this neutrality exists, and we are actually beyond the dual. And I feel this thing inside myself.
Actually, Stoicism talks about the reminder of death. Marcus Aurelius, throughout his whole life, reminded himself every day that today could be his last day. And when I was reading Marcus Aurelius' meditations for the first time, I said to myself, okay, everything's great with this guy. He's really cool, but this is a bit too much for me. But later on, I realized what kind of power this really carries, exactly in this way, Not to rush to finish, but rather to appreciate everything, so you don't lose the importance of the little things, the truly essential things, because every day is a collection of the smallest and tiniest things that make up the moment, make up the day, make up the event, the week, and so on. And that somehow keeps you on track, while the other leads to the danger of really thinking that you have an infinite number of tries physically for now.
Absolutely. And there really are a lot. So I just explained more of the philosophical idea of death in my life, but I also have quite a practical example of that. I shared with you about my grandmother. She was the closest person in the world to me at that time, just the person who understood me completely and who had the ability to love unconditionally. For me, she was an incredible example in that regard. And I remember on the 1st of March, which is usually the day when she and I used to make martenizi, and she taught me how to make them. So many memories are tied to that.
Where was that? I just want to ask because I'm really curious.
That was usually in my village, my grandmother's village, Bulgarin, near Hamanli.
Bulgarin?
Very far from here.
Yes, okay.
The village of Bulgarin.
This is the first time I've heard of it.
Yes, it's very tiny, a village. There are no mountains, no sea, but it has that grandmother's energy, and I keep going back there every year. So those childhood memories, connected to my grandmother. Now imagine a later stage in my life where I'm already 21 years old. And even though I've realized some things about life, I still keep staying in a kind of negativity. And I take it out on the world and on others, and others are always to blame. And my grandma calls me on the 1st of March and says, "Annie, how are you?" with the sweetest, nicest voice. And I immediately start acting snappy and rude with her. And she didn't even mention the 1st of March because since she sensed that I was filled with a lot of anger,
Rage.
resentment, rage, not remembering what the reason was, there was no reason, there isn't.
Some reason.
Yes, nonsense. And in the end, she told me, "I love you." But I was so angry inside that I just hung up the phone on purpose. I didn't say anything, and a few hours later, my sister called and told me she had found Grandma. She had passed away in her apartment. And that came as an incredible shock. You know, you can imagine I've gone through periods of guilt, regret, crying, and so on, but
That's tough.
that was a gift from her, because very soon after that happened, I told myself, okay, now I can choose to live in blame and regret for the rest of my life. Or I can choose to do what she would have wanted. She would have wanted me to be happy. And I told myself, I couldn't tell her that back then. I love you, but now I will live every day striving to give that unconditional love she knew how to give, and to say I love you to everything else. And then from one position, you know, we're talking for years, during which I didn't get along with my father or my mother. Actually, my grandmother was that person for me, and she passed away. And I was left with parents whom I didn't understand at the time. I had no connection with them, but little by little I started to stay. At the moment when I want to hang up the phone or when I want to slam the door, I go back and hug the person and tell them, I love you. And just to overcome this thing inside myself and to choose to say I love you because it's a fact and I have this experience. Every conversation could be the last conversation again in the context of this life. But actually that was a gift from her, which she left me with, so that I could have the choice to change.
Thank you very much for sharing this. I believe it's very valuable. Why is it hard for us to say I love you?
Because we really want to be right.
With what? About what?
About our beliefs. We really want to be right and validated in our feelings, in what we feel as emotion, which we believe defines our reality. I think that's why sometimes it's hard for us to say I love you, because we separate things. For example, you're angry at your parents, but you also love them. You can't realize this paradox within yourself, so you tell yourself, if I'm angry at them, I can't say I love you. And both things can exist together. You can disagree with someone, you can even feel anger toward that person in that moment, but the other thing also exists.
The love for him.
The love. And here it's important. Yes, in my opinion, what I have at least learned is to step back a little from ourselves, from exactly this person, and to enter again into this neutrality, so that even when it's hard for us and we're under the influence of such a heavier emotion, we can remember that deep inside we love. And that's actually the more real thing. The other passes, the anger passes.
The anger passes. Actually, yes, I've had many such situations where I remember that. I don't know if you know it. The great parable, "This too shall pass," which symbolizes exactly that neutrality. When people say, "Your son did this," or "They took your horse," he replies, "This too shall pass." No matter what happens, he always says, "This too shall pass." He always answers like that. And in this way, he shows this infinity, openness, that he is both ready for anything that happens and at the same time doesn't take anything for granted that happens to him. So, both the bad and the good are perceived a bit differently, which I know sounds philosophical and difficult, but really, with people like you, this is confirmed when you talk about it today. Tell me a bit more about this division, because before we started you also mentioned something else when we were talking about Bulgaria and in general about this. our tendency to separate the spiritual from the material and the physical, as if by doing so we really put everything into just two categories, as if there are only two figures. And in this way we miss the whole spectrum of so many realities and worlds, and above all, knowledge, information, understanding that surrounds us.
Absolutely. And this division exists both among people who classify themselves as spiritual and among those who choose to believe that there is nothing beyond the material. For the first group, it looks like in order to be spiritual, I have to follow certain rules, rituals. Accordingly, many things from the material world. They will simply, how should I put it, place a taboo on them. For example, money.
And that's it.
And that's it. That's all.
Or the clothes.
Or the clothes, or the clothes, or the appearance, or the job. While the people who choose to experience this reality, seeing is believing, they say, I don't believe in such energies, in such things. And this division, it's normal for it to exist in our dualistic world. My whole mission and journey in this life, the reason I chose this experience is because I am here to go through many extreme opposing points. Yes, so that at some point I can bring them together. This is my experience, part of my, task that I have chosen here, a task that is already clear to me. Before it wasn't like that for me.
How did you realize that?
When I started connecting more with my soul and with channeling and meditations, it just came as knowledge. Somehow, when you start receiving information like that, you just know it. It's simply within you. There's no need to doubt. But usually at some point it just lands on you like...
It just lands on you, it just comes to you nicely.
It just comes to you nicely. But what I think is important for us as people to realize is that we are first and foremost energy. We are actually something that is beyond this world. But that doesn't diminish the experience we have here. And actually, when we understand this, we can bring things together and stop dividing them. In my life, let's say this is very clear in my work, through my work. Yesterday, I had a meeting with an accountant, invoices, administration, technical things, conversations with people. We're talking about positioning this film in the context of Hollywood, for example.
For example, working with technical programs, artificial intelligence entirely on screen.
Absolutely. Learning languages, German, English, and so on. Things that are part of, the material world. But when you are connected with your spiritual essence, you have this understanding of neutrality, that besides the dual world, there is also this experience within you that is not dual. You enter all of this with a different energy and you feel the other dimension of things, and actually you become something like a bridge between these two realities, and people can sense it.
Do you think there are people whose specific task is this, just like you? Because from what you said, the conclusion is this: we can and need to play the physical game, meaning to be present here, to be who we are, but at the same time to have awareness of everything else and to remind ourselves of it, to use this information. Do you think there are people, or do you see yourself as someone who stands in the middle like a bridge, and people who are more on one or the other extreme?
Yes, I see myself as a bridge, because I notice it in the way I communicate with people, no matter which extreme they go to, that I somehow manage to adjust to the person's beliefs, to respect them, and maybe just a little bit to open them up to the other side. For example, if someone is very much, as we say, with their head in the clouds, I try to present the idea that being able to manage materially, to be practical in your life, is not any less spiritual. Because, look, you have this physical studio, this place, right? It exists, you created it with hard work, and then you have accounting and all those things.
Absolutely right. As you said it, what immediately came to my mind is that after these photo shoots, because a certain time of the month comes, again, documents have to be prepared. Everything has to be in order again. All documents must be sent, reviewed, and bank statements photographed, etc. Which is a part that maybe, and here I allow myself to speak on behalf of the people watching us, they don't see, and exactly because it isn't seen, it's as if it doesn't exist. Yes, but that's not the case at all.
Yes, that's not the case at all. And for those people who are really repulsed by this, I understand them because I've experienced that too. When you have moments, for example, when you're in nature and you connect with everything and you fall into a state of bliss, and in that moment you don't want to think about anything related to this material, physical world. But that's, another kind of extreme. I'm not saying it can't be right. There are people for whom that will be the right thing.
At this moment?
At this moment, we are different. But what I feel as maybe my mission and the message I can give to people is that during the course of our day, if we take just one day, we are like a dancer. There is music with many different instruments. At a certain moment in the music, we will dance more to the rhythm of the violin. In the next moment, we will follow the drums, and in the next moment, we will follow the singer's voice. And actually, in the same way, this particular moment, for example, in me right now, requires me to connect with myself and to tell stories, to talk to you. But maybe when I get home, I'll have to sit down and do my accounting. The fact that we go through different, feelings about life doesn't mean that one is less important than the other. It's just that every moment has its important task, so to speak. And in my opinion, it's much easier life when we learn to accept all these aspects of existence. And when we are in those moments of highest bliss, for example, in meditation or when we're doing something we really love, I'm a dancer, and for me, that's one of the greatest expressions of flow, as they say. But to accept these moments, just like the moments when we have to do something that seems very physical, material, annoying, maybe even boring. I have to sit at the NAP table.
A table, for example?
A table, yes. But here comes the paradox again, that when we accept these things and don't separate them so much, the experiences...
It can still be enjoyable for us while making tables. Absolutely. Very well said. It's very important that you said that, and thank you very much, because it's also very important to me that things don't seem one-sided. I don't want it to seem like we're working hard with our hands, putting in effort, and things just don't work out. Nothing like that. I'm interested in asking you a lot more things, and I want to continue so I don't lose my train of thought. You've been in this industry above all. What are your favorite movies to watch?
To watch?
Yes.
Oh.
And for watching, and then for doing as well. I mean, to participate in them.
Just like with music, my favorite movies are the good ones.
That's right.
Maybe the only genre I can't really appreciate is the horror genre, but aside from that...
Give me a title.
This thing, movie titles? Oh, for example, now I remember Cloud Atlas.
Oh, that's a great movie.
I've read the book too, but I like the movie more. Tom Hanks
plays the main role. Very unique. At first, nothing makes sense, at least for me, the first time.
Yes, nothing makes sense, yes. The second time I took notes.
That's very interesting that you mention it, and it reminds me to watch Cloud Atlas again. What is the key message in this movie? Please tell me, but quickly, because I want you to talk about other movies too.
The movie is about, the same souls that have...
Not only objectively, but also entirely.
Entirely through different lives, about reincarnation and the connections between different lives. For me, what really touched me about this movie was that nostalgia and the feeling I've had all my life about my other incarnations and my connection to other worlds. I experienced that in the movie as well, just by seeing...
Where did you feel it more? In the future, when they were together, or when he was alone and back in times of less civilization?
Well, I would say it's more about the whole thing, the overall intertwining, and that's why I like the movie more. Because in the book, you have each time period told one after the other. First, like the oldest time chronologically, and at the end, the most modern one.
The most futuristic.
Whereas in the movie, they were jumping from one to the other.
And if you get distracted, you miss everything. You have no idea what's going on. It's a total mess, really. Okay, next.
Another movie, here's something totally different in terms of genre. There's a documentary series on Netflix called Abstract. It's called Abstractno in Bulgarian. Each episode features a different artist. It could be an illustrator, someone who... There was a guy who designs shoes, a female architect who creates furniture from shrimp material. Really strange, innovative things like that, and each episode was filmed in a specific style that matches the person's art. For example, for the illustrator, there were a lot of illustrations and animations included in the episode itself. That's something I also find very inspiring. It doesn't have that, metaphysical side and feeling.
But it has a very artistic side.
A very artistic side, and that's something that really impresses me. To see people who may not seem to be connected to the spiritual or don't define themselves as spiritual, but you can just see how creativity swirls through them.
It just
bubbles up like that, and they change the world, even without realizing that the change they make on a material level
affects everything else.
Affects everything else?
As you said, besides the many movie titles that I love, feature films, I really like travel shows, so lately I've really enjoyed Gordon Ramsay. Around the world, when he travels to different continents, cooks, learns from the cultures, and at one point admits that one of the most elite, popular and best chefs in the world is actually learning how to do this thing. And some Chinese guy there on the street with a little pan that he hasn't changed in 5 years is cooking for him. He's cooking for Gordon Ramsay, And that's impressive, and you can see how the fire inside him is ignited, the inspiration to keep doing what he does. That kind of travel, like National Geographic style, things that are around the world, are also very interesting to me.
Yes, me too. In general, cultures, different languages, and you can see both the similarities between them and how there is a unique expression in this diversity. Actually, it's one of the riches of the world we live in. How the one thing is expressed in diversity? Yes.
In the many. Okay, a final title of another movie in another field.
I can talk about a film I'm working on now, which really inspired me, a feature-length documentary about the firefighters in the States and the so-called first responders, like the people who provide first aid. It's another interesting experience, how something that is seemingly in the material world.
Absolutely.
A movie, however. I ended up there not by accident, but to help this story be told. And in this case, it's the story of some people who do purely social work that we don't really think about in detail. And that's why I think it's so meaningful to tell this story, because we see people who go not just physically to pull others out of from death, whether it's fire, whether it's an accident, but people who provide emotional support to, for example, a mother who has lost her child. Literally people who are there and do something that is so much more than that. For example, if you are selling cups, you have to be there and somehow take on that burden of sadness.
They are like physical angels.
They are like physical angels. You said it very well, by the way. Even I'll share it with our team. We can use it.
That's with my best friend. His father is a firefighter for many years, and he's told me about similar situations where it wasn't clear whether they would even make it out at all. However, even though the building is on fire, you go inside and get people out without thinking, which is incredible, really. So that's, what I was thinking while you were telling the story? The fact that we don't pay attention to it from a positive point of view means that they're doing their job very well.
Yes.
Right? Because if they're doing their job, then it doesn't really reach us that much. It means they've already saved someone. It means the case is closed. It means they've succeeded. But in some cases, of course, that's not how it goes. Okay, tell me please about one question. Why did I ask you about the movies? Because one of the big movies right here behind me, not just this one, but this one is called Genesis. This is one of Christopher Nolan's movies, which completely changed the film industry with what he showed in it. But why am I asking you? Inside, there is a scene with Leonardo DiCaprio, who is teaching one of his students, let's call her that, I don't know what her exact title is, in the world of lucid manipulated dreams. And he brings her into a lucid dream, a dream within a dream. The moment he's inside in front of a cafe, he asks her a question. She doesn't know she's entered the dream, you see? He asks her, do you remember how we got here? And that's how you know In a way, he was explaining to her that in a dream, you can never really tell when it started. And the other day, that's what we were talking about with Valia. Well, can we remember exactly how and when we got here? Exactly when? I'm interested in your thoughts on this. You have experience with lucid dreams, you know that how every time the dream just drops you somewhere and from there you know you're inside. How does that happen?
Absolutely. Well, the dream is actually a metaphor for the dream we're living, and it's the same question we ask ourselves when we start to wake up. For me, there came a very clear realization at one point, maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, which at that moment I interpreted one way, and now I understand it differently. But then the first thought that came to me was, there is a contract between me and the Creator. I am here. I have deliberately come here to forget and not to remember where I come from and who I am. But at some point I will remember. And it's important for me to do this because in this way I will help others. And now I've reached the point where I realize that many people, if not everyone, will experience exactly this idea of awakening. But more or less, we all come here with this agreement to forget and then to remember. And actually, this process of remembering, of becoming aware, is part of the reason why we are here. It's a very exciting experience, but it also carries its own meaning. A meaning not only for our personal life, but also for the lives of others. How, through this awakening, we begin to influence our environment, the whole of humanity.
Yes, actually, that's what I was thinking about, that in the ancient Indian cultures, was it Valya, Maya, the dream, or Hindu? I'm mixing it up. There, the illusion is called Maya. That's what it's called.
In Hinduism, yes.
That's right, exactly. In Hinduism, it's Maya. And that's exactly why it's about a collective, huge dream, which also has a metaphor in the physical world. Very interesting. A dream within a dream, and at the same time, everything is awakening.
Everything is awakening, yes, and I think it's becoming easier and easier for people to wake up. That's how I feel, but, in my experience, it has been very difficult for me personally.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. Believe me, I was just about to say that. How and when did you manage to overcome yourself so that you started to talk more openly about all of this, about who you are? When did you find the strength? How did that happen? It definitely wasn't easy for you.
Not because I had a lot. I've shared things my whole life, and many times I've somehow been shamed for it or humiliated at the time. That's how I experienced it. I would say that only recently I started talking about this the same way I talk about finishing a work project or washing the dishes. I started talking to everyone according to what I know is comfortable for them, because I absolutely believe in everyone's freedom of choice and that we shouldn't impose anything on anyone. But I started sharing these things about myself. For example, a conversation like, today Bejin Saduno appeared in my dream and this and that happened. But it's hard, I admit, even now, imagining that this is an interview, right? Maybe people who know me and who don't associate me with these things at all will see it. There's a fear of rejection and criticism, but it comes again from that past I've lived through, and partly because I've realized the illusion of that rejection in the past. I know that now, even when these fears appear, they're just part of the same collective illusion again.
How do you manage to share without imposing?
With a lot of love. I just have a lot of love for people in my heart.
In English, it's compassion. How do you translate that in Bulgarian? Sympathy.
Sympathy?
Compassion, right? Yes.
Compassion and sympathy. And I believe that this is at least my path, maybe not for everyone, but it's just this feeling that you can really feel love for everything, for everyone. Even when you have criticism towards him, even when you don't agree with him, or when you see his limitations, how he chooses to limit himself. But I wouldn't have this compassion if I myself hadn't gone through all these spectrums of unawareness and realized them in the process. And I know that this is one of the reasons I chose to remember in this way, because not everyone has to take such a confrontational and heavy path. As a teenager, I really had suicidal thoughts, bulimia, mental disorders, as we would call them now, very severe depressions and things that not everyone has to face in order to, let's say, wake up. But for me, I chose this maybe exactly so that I could... Now, when I sit down and talk to someone who, let's say, feels a lot of fear or a lot of resistance to something, I can understand them. And actually, through this understanding, I might eventually be able to help them change their perspective a little, but not in a way that they would experience as violence.
That's an art, you know?
Yes, spiritual diplomacy.
That's good.
How would I ever think of that?
Cool. So, we came up with two things today. Spiritual diplomacy and that firefighters are the physical angels.
Yes, I really like both of them.
I really like spiritual diplomacy. Ha ha ha. Tell me about channeling.
Channeling is a very, very new experience.
Yes.
In which you play a huge role and have a big part.
What do you mean by channeling? Forget about us. What do you mean by channeling? What is this thing for you? How did you discover it? Just tell me everything.
How did I discover it? First, I heard about Bashar on your channel.
For the first time?
For the first time?
Seriously?
Absolutely.
Wow, cool.
Just about 3 months ago, I said, let me see who this guy is. My first thought was, if someone can channel him, then why can't I connect with some, aliens? That was my first thought. I opened Daryl Anka's channel and he starts talking in this super expressive, emotional way. And I said, oh no, this guy isn't for me. A lot, that energy, I don't know, I can't. But I was curious, so I said, I'll listen about those 5 steps that he, suggests. Now, inside me live both intuition and rationality, and I always use both a lot, for my perceptions. I hear this thing and, okay, I forget about it. But my brain somehow starts to process this inside, to digest that information. And 3 days later, I catch myself starting to think about my friends and examples from my life, realizing that they've done exactly what he's talking about.
Is that so?
Yes, but exactly that thing. To follow your passion without any attachment to the outcome along the way, to be aware of these inner
beliefs, to follow them.
Beliefs that, yes, and actually somehow to let things happen on their own. And I just start to see that this thing exists in real examples in my life, people around me. And then I started to listen to it more, But something inside me was really nagging me about this channeling because...
was it nagging you to do it or not to do it?
For me to do it because, as I told you, this problem with authorities that I've had telling me that I'm not spiritual enough for this or that, somehow I've always felt it was wrong for me. I believe that every person is already everything and has the potential for everything. It's just a matter of choice. And I told myself, well, maybe I can do it too. And I started to research and saw that some people do it with deceased loved ones, with universal consciousness, aliens and so on, with their inner self. And as soon as I heard about this thing with the higher self, or whatever we want to call it, this...
Higher.
The higher part of us, which is connected to everything. And I knew that I had this connection.
Anyway,
yes. And there are really moments when this knowledge just comes down instantly. However, I was curious to explore it through what people call channeling, and I started. It's still something I'm exploring and it's very new, but for the short period that I've been doing it, the thing that came up for me is to follow my intuition again and my own way of doing things. And that's actually a certain state that I put myself in again, a state of neutrality. But in it, there's also this characteristic of mine, like a sense of playfulness.
Okay.
It's like I become a little child in my mind. I have no attachments, but that's also the way I most easily connect with consciousness and with that higher self, because that works for me. It's just that in this moment, it's funny, it's amusing, it has a sense of humor. And then the information actually comes through most clearly, and things just fall into place, sometimes in the form of words that I always hear or physical sensations.
Have you ever written down anything that has come to you?
Yes, yes.
What has impressed you the most so far? What has come as unique knowledge, something that has been important and valuable?
Things related to my mission here, which I have chosen for myself, about the fact that I need to start living from a position of energy. I'll make a side note because there's no other way. Along with this channeling, there are energies that wanted to enter me, and during a regression, actually I connected with one of my spirit guides and he wanted to enter me in balance, actually to activate the right side of my energy body, which wasn't active. After that, since I was already familiar with this feeling, when an energy or being wants to enter to help me, I was able once again to allow and let such an energy enter me. At that point, I started shaking, crying, some things came out, literally physical symptoms. Then they disappeared, but what I received as information at that time was now, this energy is balanced or maybe at a higher vibration, but you need to start making choices in life. And the practical ones, again, we got to the practical part, the practical manifestations of living yourself from that position. And that was connected to my inner doubts and my personal blocks that I put on myself. Actually, just to relax and allow myself to be this help to people, which until now I have given in a smaller circle because it was more comfortable for me with my loved ones, with my friends, with random people I meet.
But actually, it's good to tell people that you have not one but two channels.
Yes. Right now I'm actively using the Bulgarian one because I have a slightly different vision for the English one.
But you're using the Bulgarian one. And what have you been sharing there so far? Because from now on, it's going to be different.
Yes, I was thinking about this until now. I was sharing everything, my personal stories, my experience, with the goal of inspiring people to give them more strength and faith in themselves, in other words. I'm literally telling my own stories as a kind of example and sharing my personal philosophy, but I haven't really gone into the things we're talking about today. This is, how do you say, the first time?
Baptism. Ha 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 ha. Baptism. Cool. Yes, I think that means the time has come and you are ready for this. And people, I'm sure the listeners will just want to hear more from you and your way of thinking and how you interpret certain events and things that have happened to you. Just today I had a very short message like that because I also often struggle with myself when I realize, let's say, a foundation and a basis. Let's say thanks to Bashar, thanks to ancient civilizations and teachings, and I say to myself, okay, what more? How many times? I mean, at some point, by repeating it, I feel like people will think that I think they're stupid. These are the thoughts that go through my head. But today I received a very interesting message. The information may seem basically the same, but every moment for a different experience is the same information. It's different, and really, even for me, it's different as it is for those on the other side, and then it actually becomes new. And as they put it exactly, it becomes updated information. That is, it somehow self-updates.
Yes.
And there's always something added to it, something that's different, a different shot, and that's what actually gives it meaning, while the other one is just what it is.
And it's like watching the same movie every 5 years and you'll see totally new things the second time because you are different.
Speaking of movies, how do you resonate with the idea of people who really want things to be just like in the movie The Matrix?
Well, I've noticed that people like to get fixated. We really like to stay fixated on what's familiar, on our ideas, on what we've done so far, on what we've believed so far. But life is change, and that means our perceptions change too. The Matrix has helped us get acquainted with the topic. It exists, as you said, even in Hinduism. But for the modern person to become familiar with the subject, about the possibility that maybe there is something beyond the things I can touch and see, but it is constantly evolving. Here, Genesis is a movie that builds on this, it builds on this. Now, what we see happening in the world, like YouTube, for example, the media on YouTube, that's something completely different. People no longer need to go to the cinema to get such a message. It's absolutely enough to just open YouTube. What I was thinking recently about this channeling is that maybe the next level is to start meeting in groups while we do channelings. Actually, to consciously hold seminars together with these consciousnesses. For example, we gather here, connect with a specific consciousness and meet in this space. And the possibilities, most likely, we can't even imagine them. But from here on...
How do you see something like that? Let me stop you for a second, because I've had such thoughts too, to see if it's the same as yours. So, do people gather and channel at the same time? Or do they wait for their turn one by one? That's still limiting thinking, but anyway, how do you see it?
If we take into account that time is basically an illusion, and when a person meditates and goes to a place where it's a different idea, but maybe what I would imagine is that even if we're not physically in the same place, maybe it would be easier if we agree to do it at the same time. For example, today at 4:30, instead of going to a seminar, we just sit down and connect to that space we're focusing on with the intention to connect there. And maybe we invite a specific consciousness or specific consciousnesses. By the way, in one of the books by Carlos Castaneda, it was mentioned that he himself had gone through some similar trainings.
Yes, his name is mentioned there. Mescalito was the name of his guardian in the other world, or the one he met at the beginning. And he actually goes through exactly, I'm trying to remember as I speak in detail. That's right, yes, I remember another thing, where they are taught to see through the eyes of birds, of falcons and eagles.
Yes, I remember that too.
It came to me more as a way of connecting differently, because the eagle, let's say, is somewhere else, right? And a connection is made, and they actually see through its eyes what's happening, who's coming, if someone is coming, whether they're going to be attacked or not, and so on. And they get information, come back, and prepare accordingly.
That's very interesting. See, I had forgotten about that, but yes, I think we are just starting to explore these things more and more. And that's why there will continue to be a need for media, for videos, for books that talk about this. Because this is something very new for most of humanity, and we are a bit, how should I say, sometimes we feel blind and deaf in this thing. And when we add all the collective beliefs, the self-doubt, we will need the steps, so...
I absolutely agree. And actually, one of my personal thrills is creating such films and productions much larger in scale, which on one hand introduce an even wider audience with all this, but also to expand ourselves as we do it, meaning to actively participate in these experiences, as you said about that.
Yes, and we will also change, right? If we sit down to talk like this in 5 years...
That would be very interesting.
Yes, maybe completely different things, and here you even... I think right now I feel that it's useful to tell the viewers that you will be different in 5 years. Not to mention that at every moment you are a different person, but I think it's useful to let go of these expectations that now I like this, and I expect this person to have exactly the same opinion every day, to be exactly the same person, because first of all, every opinion contains the others within itself. And from the position of the dual world, it's very hard to explain things in words. And the other thing is that we are all constantly changing. While we are in this physical form, we will keep changing. We will see things in a different way. from a different angle. We will evolve for ourselves, through ourselves, and for others.
Absolutely. Very, very well said. Tell me about the Pleiadians and about Atlantis.
Atlantis has always been a topic in my life. I've never had,
Let me just say, you look like a modern version of an Atlantean priestess.
Thank you. I like that description. I'll keep it to myself inside. Ever since I was little, as I said, my mom used to tell me stories about Atlantis, the sunken Atlantis, and the Atlanteans. And that really fascinated me even back then. And I have always been deeply connected to a memory which feels more like a sensation. The physical aspect of that memory is my incredible connection with water. I learned to swim underwater when I was 3.5. And even now, when I swim, I only come up for air when I can't hold my breath any longer. I love diving, being underwater, yes.
Being in the water?
To be in the water. Yes, water is something that connects me, with a more genuine part of myself, especially during the years when I didn't have such a strong connection with my soul. Back then, somehow I would find it through the water, and all of this sounds really, nice.
Yes, well...
But while not... I was channeling Archangel Michael one day, and that was one... So maybe one of the first times I was connecting with him, the first times when, he was talking to me, and he said, "You are from the Pleiades, you have a spiritual Pleiadian family, and I am both Pleiades and Pleiadian myself."
What's the last one?
What's the last one? I had heard the word Pleiades, Pleiadians, but I just knew that these were some kind of galactic beings. Nothing more. I didn't know if it's called Pleiades or Pleiadians. The word was just vaguely familiar to me. I had no idea that the Atlanteans are part of this consciousness, this galactic consciousness. And I came out of the meditation and started to research. And the first thing, naturally, first I asked Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer, and it told me,
So this happened, yes, actually you said that this was recent.
Very, very recently, yes, it happened, right? I asked for pictures of them to see because I thought, I hope they're not ugly like Bashar. Just because, I don't know, the images that are on the internet. Those are a bit scary. And then these beautiful people showed up.
Blonde,
right? Tall with these slender limbs, very inspiring. And then I realized that the Atlanteans are also part of the Pleiadian constellation consciousness. Then I asked in meditation, and I realized that yes, I absolutely have a connection with Atlantis. That's where I come from, and I am connected to that spiritual family. And then I actually watched one of your videos about them where I learned more things. So from this research, this study that I did, here's something, again, I'll talk about the connection between the spiritual and the physical. Very often, we actually do channeling while, for example, we're reading a book or reading information from the internet or listening to a video. I had a very strong channeling experience during our meeting at certain moments. Is that right?
Is that right?
Yes, for example, you are talking about something, but in my mind, about 3 times as much information on the same topic is being generated, plus different things. It's just that sometimes when we connect with information from the physical world or with a collective, with a person, it becomes much easier for us to be conduits of that knowledge and information. Yes, even while I was reading the information or watching the video about the Pleiades, this information just started to flow about how they work. Through opening the heart, through compassion and emotional empathy. And that's the reason why I'm so overly emotional, and that this is also my path here in physical existence, through opening the heart and through compassion.
And now, do you connect with them often, or have you not established such a connection yet?
I do connect with them. They're somehow constantly around me now, which is an interesting experience. This happened really very recently, and I have these long periods when I get caught up in daily matters, and not every week. I have the opportunity, for example, to devote myself to deep meditation for a long time, to be able to relax and have, say, a longer channeling session. But last night, for example, I connected with them again, just before falling asleep, while I was lying down. And yes, I somehow received support. Exactly for this thing, to let my voice out, to open up to this mission and to this thing that...
And today I want to say that you sound very natural, you sound very calm and confident, meaning you are in your place. That's what I want to say, you sound like that. Thank you, and it's very nice to talk to you, just so you know.
Thank you very much, really. And you really make it easy for this to happen.
It's part of the job. As they say, just an ordinary Tuesday. I'm kidding, this is really cool. And while you're receiving these messages, do you get up to write them down, or do you rely on them just coming into you and remembering them?
I've written down very few things. I mostly try to integrate them because channeling can come through many things, but the sixth sense is always involved. The feeling, the intuition, which is, it directly translates as inner knowing. And in my opinion, that's what stays with us the longest. Because if we just write down the words, it depends. At least for me, that's how it works. And sometimes later we can read them, but we read them more with the mind and don't feel them as deeply as the actual sensation. And that's why I even try not to focus so much on translating it as a voice in my head, but directly as a feeling and as knowledge. I try to integrate it, and then if I want, I can verbalize it. For example, this thing that happened yesterday, now I remember it as a feeling, but now I remember to verbalize it. What they told me was exactly related to this fear that appeared in me with the YouTube channel where I share my story, and even with this appearance here. A fear where I started thinking, well, what if some of my close people, for example, just reject me, don't want to communicate with me because they think this is abnormal? Or people who are devout Christians, for example, might say that this is demonic. You know, people interpret everything in all sorts of ways. Or someone might just say, she's crazy. Whatever it may be, all these fears, and what came as knowledge is that with still, because, you know, this is a change, a transition, it has a very strong emotional expression in me, through me. But with time, I will stop feeling this thing and I will be more and more in this neutrality that is beyond duality. And this came as a message from them.
Cool. Have you received messages so far for everyone, for humanity?
Yes, as knowledge. Even before I started to do channeling.
What did they say about all of us?
Actually, I'm going to share something that came through channeling recently, because it just comes to me that we are here with different preferences. That is, some people will never open up or awaken in this particular life about the things you and I are talking about. Other people will use, for example, astrology, something else, Reiki, whatever it is. Every person has that free will and maybe even a somewhat predetermined plan about what exactly to experience and how to experience it. And at least for me, this created and reinforced the understanding of respecting each person's choice. And the fact that, for example, I realize for myself that I have a mission. It has been in me my whole life because I was born with this plan, with this idea. But that doesn't mean that a person who doesn't have such a firmly established, definite and clear mission is doing less for the world. And I'll give as an example something that, at least for now, my partner feels. To me, he's like a son. He's just like a child playing at life. And he himself has shared this with me. I don't have such a sense of mission, but he's all sunshine. He's all light. And it's through what he is. And I receive this again as an intuitive understanding. He also changes the world. He also influences the world, but there's no need. He can definitely do it in a way like I do, which is somehow more engaging.
Yes.
And that was very interesting for me. Another thing that is also connected to my mission and to humanity. I understood why I went through these difficulties with the institutions, with kindergarten and with schools.
Why?
because I had the urge to create an alternative school ever since I was 14. And I just know that at some point in my life, this opportunity will come with a collective, with many people, where I will take part in creating the new kind of education on the planet. By the way, it's already being created in many places. Yes, we're not talking about something that will be pioneering, but in some way my work will be connected to this. And people will actually go to school in places just as I see them. Places that are in nature, very connected to nature, but also very connected to technology, to the purely practical things in life. We still, separate them, but they are actually one. And at the same time, a large part of these schools, maybe not all at first, but some will have, and these, how should I say, this teaching, these things we're talking about with you.
I think it's no coincidence that Hogwarts and Harry Potter have become so deeply ingrained in our collective memory. With a very specific idea, exactly this one. Again at 16 or 17 from back then, since actually I started watching Marvel movies. And there, in the case of X-Men, there's a Professor Charles Xavier and a huge school for mutants. There, mutants are portrayed as people who at some point gain unusual abilities and at some point are rejected by the whole nation, by society. And he creates a fortress, a safe place where they can develop their abilities and be among their own kind. So I've always known that at some point in my life, things like that related to the X-Men would happen, or something similar. Whether we start it or we're just a part of it, even partially, there will be many such places. I feel the same way, somewhere in nature, but also very high tech, because we're moving into the stage where flying cars are coming.
Absolutely.
And that's interesting, very much so.
It's very interesting and very exciting, and somehow, at least for me, very often it makes me think about those children who are being born now and the people who are coming into the world right now, even my own children.
Let me interrupt you, please, because I just had a thought right now. The other day, Valeto and I were watching a show about the new Tesla Model Y 2026, where the woman, the mother, her child, how old is she now, Vale? 4, 5, maybe less 3. He probably won't even need to get a driver's license and become a driver, because cars are already coming out that don't even have a steering wheel inside. So he gets in, it takes him somewhere, then brings him back. And the woman, in this case, was struggling mentally with these thoughts, saying to herself, am I too old? How do I accept this? How can I let my child go to such a place? From here to there? But in 20 years.
That will be the reality.
Chat generative pre-trained transformer has been around for 3 years, officially, unofficially, I don't know how many, and the changes are
Colossal.
colossal.
As an editor, my job involves working with monitors, mice, keyboards, and all that. And even about 6 years ago, I was like this. I'm waiting for the time when we'll be working with glasses and everything will be a hologram. And instead of using a mouse and keyboard, I'll just be editing by moving and touching the hologram. This can automatically create different experiences, not in the cinema, but on my screen for us to be in this sphere experience. So with the hologram, editing will be much easier than on a screen, especially if you want to edit something that a person will experience around themselves. And these things are already happening. I thought of them before they even existed in the world, because I connected, with this information. It just came to me intuitively. People have already created a large part of these things and they will continue to improve them. And that's why we don't need, this resistance to change at all, whatever it may be, because things will happen on their own, regardless of whether we like it or not. In general, as Eckhart Tolle says, resistance is the cause of all the suffering we create.
Very well said. Ani, we're coming to the end of our wonderful conversation, which really is very, very... It's both deep and immersive, and at the same time light, for which I'm very grateful to you. At the end, I ask a few questions that are meant to be answered in one sentence.
All right.
Tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right. With all your experience so far, have you answered the question of where we come from?
From the one.
And why are we here?
To play.
And where are we going?
I don't know. Or I choose to, I don't know.
Alright,
I don't want to know yet.
what's the best advice you've ever been given?
I'll have to think about that for a bit.
Here's the time.
Not to take myself too seriously.
What's the worst advice you've ever been given?
There are a lot. Especially in school. Stick to art. You're not good at anything else.
Okay. What is love?
Love is our true essence.
If you had the opportunity right now to send a message to the entire planet Earth, to all of humanity at this very moment, what would you say to them?
I would tell them if they're in a place where they feel deep suffering or pain or meaninglessness, something that makes them dislike life or even not want to live it, to try to open their heart to the whole world and hold it inside. And in this deep, deep love, whether we are in suffering or in joy, lies our freedom.
Ani, my deepest respect and heartfelt thanks for being a guest on Reality Explorers. It was truly a great pleasure. Thank you.
For me as well, thank you so much.